welcome to episode 161 of The Route. The Route is an A to B podcast that essentially is a glorified coffee chat that gets you a new guest every week. I'm your host, Chris Nascimento, and let's get started. Before we begin today's episode and get into the guest, just a couple things to cover as always. First off, if you haven't already, subscribe to the podcast. We're available on all the major audio platforms: Apple, Google, Spotify, Amazon, 6 others as well. So you can find us anywhere you listen to your podcasts. And then also we're available via video. That's on YouTube underneath The Routecast. All one word. You can search us up with the Routecast, and it'll be a bit easier to find us there. And then once you've done that, you followed, you subscribed, you liked, you rated 5-star, all that good stuff there. Let's hop on to social media and use that same username, The Routecast, and follow us on all social media platforms. Run all the traditional ones, but the one that maybe stands out to you most is LinkedIn. That's the one where we kind of get the most engagement. It's the best for the type of content we're chatting about. But at the same time, too, if you're starting a career, it's a great way to maybe start your network by connecting with the guests, myself, the people engaging with the page. Maybe you can maintain your network or even just grow it as well. So check us out there at the Routecast on all social media platforms and follow us wherever you see fit. With that now said, we can get into today's guest. Today's guest is brought to you by Zoom. In the world of partnerships, there's a simple principle: you adapt or you die. In this fast-paced industry, you can't afford to miss a beat, and that's where Zoom will help you win each and every time. Zoom provides premier real-time data insights for partnerships across broadcast, streaming, and social like no one else. They're always ready, and detailed analytics help you get the upper hand and save time in your day-to-day reporting. So if you're ready to upgrade your reporting today, make the smart choice and choose Zoom. With that, today's guest. I'd now like to welcome someone who's actually a personal connection of mine from the Ottawa area and who started a career in the polycoms and public affairs area prior to dabbling in the world of entrepreneurship. So with that, they're now leading the charge at a boutique public affair, advocacy communications, and advertising agency, president and CEO at Spark Advocacy. Perry Tsergas, welcome to The Route. How's it going?
It's going great, Chris. Thanks for having me today. You nailed the pronunciation of my last name.
Yeah, the English way, right? At least
the English way. Yeah,
exactly.
I'm not gonna hold your feet to the fire on the super Greek way, the Tsergas. But you're Portuguese, so you probably could have nailed that pronunciation.
Could have. Maybe I should have attempted it, but no, that's good stuff. And
next pod.
Next pod, exactly. Next pod. As the podcast, the name is The Route. I guess we should get into it. Maybe take us where it began, how to get to where we are now, and then we'll fill in the gaps from there.
Yeah, great. Well, look, I thanks for having me on. I love your pod. I've listened to several episodes. First one was my good buddy Dave Ladders, who hails from the same high school as me, which is a good segue to you answering the beginning of the route question, which is, where did it all start? And I would say that my bug for entrepreneurship started growing up in the family restaurant that we had in London, Ontario. Big shock, right? Greek, and we had a family restaurant.
Yeah.
So that's where I spent my days and my evenings, watching and learning, seeing the highs and lows of what owning your own business is like, and the restaurant business it poses unique challenges for sure, in terms of staff churn, in terms of tight margins, in terms of seasonality. So I credit so much of my sense of business and how to run a business, how to treat people, what to stress about, what not to stress about, from watching my dad, whose name is Chris, do what he did, and watching my stepmother Dawn, who helped him in that business day in and day out, and somehow managed to raise me and my 3 siblings while also running a business. So that's that's where it started. It really did start in the family business. My mother had always exposed me to politics growing up. Dragged me out to city council meetings and dragged me out to canvassing for municipal candidates and other folks. So from a young age, between my father telling me that Greece was the cradle of Western civilization and democracy, and telling me I had to read all those history books and philosophers, and between my mother, Effie, exposing me to Canadian politics, modern politics, I really did gravitate to political issues and news from a very, very young age. Was a huge news consumer, in my preteens and all through high school, and then really gravitated towards taking legal classes, history classes, and political classes at Lucas High School in London, Ontario. So it was an easy decision for me when I decided where I wanted to do my undergraduate, where I wanted to do university, and that was Carleton, because it was in our nation's capital, and I had set a goal for myself, a singular focus, that beyond going to get my undergraduate, my degree, that I was going to find a way to plug into Canadian politics. That was a foregone conclusion for me. So that's where it started. That's what sort of lit the fuse on how I got to today. That's the genesis of it all, is just being a complete political nerd growing up, a news junkie, and knowing that I needed to make my way to Ottawa, because that was the seat of power, and that's where decisions got made, and I wanted to see it, learn it. To use a nerdy Hamilton Broadway reference for some of your listeners, that I wanted to be in the room where it happens, and I wanted to understand it and see how all that sausage got made.
Yeah, no, that's kind of an interesting background. I didn't know about the restaurant, and I guess because what I typically like doing is just kind of focusing on the beginning, and then we'll work our way through it. Was there ever maybe a point in time where you had doubt in regards to going into politics? Because it sounded like you had a pretty clear goal of what you wanted, but just having that, let's say, exposure to entrepreneurship growing up with your dad, was there ever maybe a thought process of, hey, let me go down that road of, let's say, a business degree instead?
Yeah, zero doubt. Yeah, to the point it caused, great, not an insignificant amount of friction. Nothing deep or lasting, but my dad wanted to basically hand over the family restaurant, and could just not wrap his head around why I would want to go to a different city, why I would want to get a degree in politics and legal studies, which is what I studied at Carleton. Just couldn't wrap his head around it. It didn't understand how I would ever monetize that. Didn't understand, why I would want to do that when the family restaurant was sitting right there for me to become more involved in and learn the ins and outs of, beyond what I had already.
Yeah.
Same with my stepmother, and again, in their minds, they were looking out for my best interests. Right?
For sure.
I can remember a conversation with my stepmother, Dawn, where she was encouraging me to think about skilled trades, which of course today,
Really? Yeah.
it's quite possible that financially speaking, over the years, I would have compounded a lot more money in my bank account, understanding some of the labor shortages that our skilled trades have. It's actually a good chunk of the work I get to do today at Spark is help with skilled trades recruitment. That's fast forwarding ahead a little bit, but yeah, there's no doubt for me to answer your question. I knew this is where I wanted to go, and I shot down the idea of doing anything else other than coming to Ottawa and getting involved in politics and learning about politics.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. And I guess then with that in mind, when you came to Ottawa, did you right away have that, let's say, student cap on, where you position yourself to those in Ottawa saying, hey, I'm a student. Can I, shadow you for the day? Hey, can I, pick your brain? Like, did you do that right away, or did it take some time to kind of get into that flow?
Yeah, I'm going to level with you. The first year was a total write-off.
Yeah,
Um,
myself as well.
I was in residence, which I would recommend to any young person thinking about going off to university or college, just to get that experience. It's amazing, the people you meet, what you learn about yourself, and learning about independent living and having to make choices and decisions and not rely on your parents. So year one for me at Carleton was I was studying politics and I was reading about politics, but I did not plug in to Canadian politics in year one. I was far too busy enjoying the highs of residence living and just sort of trying to tread water on the course schedule and the course packs and all the reading and all the essays, all the
Yeah.
reports, all that fun
No.
stuff. It really wasn't until the summer in between my first year and my second year at Carleton, which I'll throw the number down as 2004. So there you go. Your listeners can do the math on my age now. But it was the summer of 2004 where it was the last time I would ever move home, and the last time I would ever live in London, Ontario. And I moved home, and it was the federal election, and it was the election where Paul Martin had become the prime minister following Jean Chrétien, and the matchup was Martin versus Stephen Harper, and that was the first time I plugged into Canadian politics. I walked in to the campaign office of a local incumbent member of parliament for my riding. Didn't know the person. I'd never had a contact before in the party or with his office, and I just put my hand up and said, put me to work. I'm here to volunteer. They were super suspicious of me. I think they wondered, like, why are you here without a parent? You're not plugging in through a student club from Western or Fanshawe or anything like that. And so they just had me stuffing envelopes and doing some of that menial labor that is an important part of every local campaign. But eventually, I would go on to door knock, with the candidate, go with him to all candidates debates, go with him to media interviews, and I was hooked. I was totally obsessed. I loved every minute of it. I think my favorite thing was door knocking. It's still to this day my favorite part of campaigns.
I think that's maybe something, if you don't mind, like touching on more. So just in regards to how did you go from walking in to the office and saying, "Hey, can I help?" to then
Yeah.
walking with the candidate. How did you make that jump? Because I think that might be important to hear too.
Yeah, well, look, the two shortest supplies and the highest demand in any campaign is money and people. They always need more money, and they always need bodies. And I didn't have money, but but I had hours to give during the day because I was working in the evening at our family restaurant, and so I was this person who was not shy, like chatting with strangers and getting to know them and asking them questions. And I think that's the Greek DNA maybe, has always made it easy for me to do that. And so I think for them, they just saw a very useful resource in an individual who had a lot of time to give and didn't suffer from shyness, and so could get on the phone, or could talk to media, could talk to other volunteers, could talk to voters to try to persuade them and identify how they were going to vote. And so that's how that happened. It was sort of an open net, an open door that I walked through, and immediately got an addiction for it.
And going on from there, so obviously this is the time, I'm assuming, while you're at university, but then how did you leverage that once you graduated, right? Because I think, the audience for this podcast kind of varies in regards to young professionals to people that are a bit more established in their career. So
Yeah.
there's kind of a wide variety of people of what they're maybe listening for. So let's say going for that listener that's maybe at the earlier stages of their career that are, taking that jump to get that first job, they're about to graduate. How did you do that? Was it more so just leveraging all the experience you garnered from, let's say, some of those elements you just mentioned there? or was
Yeah.
it where you still had to, just apply on a job board and kind of go on from there?
Yeah. Well, look, the way that election story ends is a couple different things happened. Paul Martin beat Stephen Harper. The Liberals won and defeated the Conservatives in that election, and Paul Martin was prime minister for a short period of time. The local candidate I worked for won and made it into cabinet. And then the third thing that happened is that candidate turned to me a week out from election day and said, it's a shame you don't live in Ottawa, because I could really use a guy like you in my Ottawa office. But since you're in London, would you like a job in my local constituency office? It had never come up that I was studying in Ottawa at Carleton, in the nation's capital, just down the street from Parliament Hill, and short bus ride on the number 7 away. And when I told him that, I had the job basically through a handshake, and that is how I went into my second year as a part-time political staffer and a full-time student, which I do not recommend to any of your listeners. It was a real boot camp crash course in time management, which is to say I failed miserably at it, and learned very quickly that I needed to shift into being a part-time student for the rest of my undergrad. But what the takeaway might be, and the piece of advice might be to your listeners who are earlier in their career stage, I would sum it up as saying, shoot your shot, right? Shoot your shot in terms of, what are you passionate about? What are you interested in? What do you want to be doing? What do you want to be working on? What sector do you want to be in? Who do you want to be exposed to? For me, it was politics, right? Politics and government and law. And so that was clear. I was really clear-eyed about that. I knew what I had to do. And so, for folks who are listening to your pod, and for them that's sports, or, the international development sector, or, law, whatever it is, shoot your shot. Go after the folks in that sector that you admire and that you perceive to be successful, and ask them to meet for coffee. Ask them if they have open positions for internships or co-op opportunities or part-time work, or volunteer opportunities, because the answer is almost always that they do. And politics is not unique. Everyone is in short supply of bodies these days. Good bodies with good bodies in the sense of the people come wired for having work ethic, curiosity, and a passion for that particular sector or particular cause that's associated with where they're reaching out to.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's a great piece of advice to share. And I guess then from there, if you're in second year, is that something you just kind of continued on, where you just continued working full time as you were working in politics until, let's say, you made that switch in regards to maybe starting to dabble into that entrepreneurial space? Sorry.
Yeah, well, look, what ended up happening for several years is, I was a part-time student and selecting courses that were more in the evening, so that it would allow me the freedom to work during the day on Parliament Hill. What happened was that my entrepreneurial background from the family restaurant business came in real handy, because in 2006, Harper and the Conservatives defeated Paul Martin in the Liberal government. And so the Liberals went into what we call in politics the wilderness. They were the opposition. And when you're in opposition in Canadian politics, for your listeners who aren't as familiar with how Parliament Hill works and how the life of a member of Parliament works, you basically lose most of your resources. You lose most of your office funding, and the support staff that you get from being in government, from controlling government. So all of a sudden, for the staff who run these offices for opposition members of Parliament, you become a Jill jack of all trades. You are responsible for policy and legislation. You're responsible for media and communications. You're responsible for administration and operations. Office budgets and HR and booking members' travel. You end up having to do it all, and so that's what happened. I had to do it all basically for the back end of my political staffer life, which is 2006 when the Liberals lost, through 2011. Another loss under Liberal leader Stéphane Dion in 2008, where I wound up working for a Vancouver member of Parliament, and then another loss again for the Liberals in 2011. Under Michael Ignatieff, losing to Stephen Harper. And at that stage, I was working for a Newfoundland Labrador member of Parliament from St. John's. And it gave me an incredible experience for those years that I did my tour of duty as a political staffer, 04 through 2011. I made a network of people in every province and territory across this country. I met people who would have gone on to become my colleagues, vendors I work with, my clients. I gained great perspective and insight into not just how government functions and not just how laws and regulations and funding come together. That's the room where it happens stuff that I alluded to earlier. But I got to understand different business sectors, different organization types, how a union works, how the nonprofit sector functions. I learned about industry associations. I learned about tech and ag and transportation and financial services. And the other thing that happened is I met my wife in 2008. She's a fellow political staffer, and she wasn't my wife in 2008, but turned into my wife in 2012 after I had left the Hill, and we've gone on to have two amazing children together. And she's no longer a political staffer. She had a much more interesting political career than I did. Got to work for Prime Minister Trudeau for many years, but I credit my time in politics with giving me the perspective and the network that would go on to be how I basically transitioned into entrepreneur life in 2011 and beyond through to today.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of a perfect segue into where my mind was going to next, and obviously just your route as a whole. But how did that, let's say, fork in the road come about? Was it something? Obviously, I'm assuming that defeat in the political race obviously had a major impact in it. But was that something already starting to, let's say, brew in the back of your mind in regards to, hey, this is something I could be doing because I'm getting so much experience in, this space, that space. I'm learning so much. I have a feeling that I have a value to provide to people. Is that where it started to initiate, or is that something where one day it hit you and you're like, let's try it?
No, you're right. It was the former. It had been building for a few years.
Oh, wow.
Politics is like fly sticky paper. Like for people who get into it, most people tend to stick around and keep coming back to it. It's got a way of sort of sucking you in and making you really invested in what happens and in the outcomes, in terms of what you're supporting or what you're opposing. And yet, I think around 2010, maybe even as early as 2009, I definitely started to feel like I personally, from a career standpoint, from a skills standpoint, was starting to plateau in terms of what I was learning or what I was getting out of the experience. Even if I had more gas in the tank, in terms of wanting to fight, to wanting to keep doing what I was doing and advocating for the causes and the issues we were doing and we were pursuing on a personal level. I think around that time period, it definitely occurred to me that either I would have to go back to school, and I had written my LSATs and I was thinking about going to law school and thinking about a career in law, or that it was time to leave and join another organization, and focus on policy or focus on government affairs, government relations, public affairs, different euphemisms that all mean the same thing, or comms, right? That goes back to that Jack Jill of all trades type thing that I had the benefit of. I had options. And so I was feeling like it was maybe time to think about what my next move was, but it wasn't really until that election in 2011 that it created a really nice page turning moment for me to reflect and just take stock and take pause and say, do I want to stick around and keep doing this? Is there more that I have to give, and is there more that I can take out of it? Because I think that's sort of the two-part question whenever you're thinking about where your career is at. What more can you contribute to the organization, to the cause, to the agenda, and what more can you get out of it? It really is a two-way street. And basically where I landed in that moment of reflection in 2011 is it's time to move on, time to go and tackle a new adventure.
For sure. No, that makes a ton of sense. And I guess as that came about, going back to maybe one of that same questions I had when it came to you deciding what program you wanted to study in university, was there ever any doubt in regards to what type of business you would start? Or was it something where I remember when I started my business at a university, I knew it was something I wanted to do because I felt like I could learn a lot from it. But then at the start, I was like, hey, what could I do that would be a bit different? I had a whiteboard. I was just kind of writing all these different things. I'm like, here's what I'm good at. Here's where I like to get skills in. And here's what I'm not so good at. So let's avoid it to an extent. Is that something you had to do as well? Or was it more so a clear path just from your experiences that hey, let's go into, public affairs and creating an agency for that?
Yeah. It was a lot more murky what was going to happen next in that moment of reflection in 2011. So, in 2003, 2004, where I was really tunnel visioned in on, I knew I was going to plug into Canadian politics. Come hell or high water, that was how that was going to go. In 2011, I really didn't know what would happen next. And like a lot of your guests that you have on and interview, and probably like a lot of the peers that your listeners have in their lives, and maybe this is their personal experience as well, it was kind of just happenstance, in terms of how everything evolved next. So what happened was, while I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do next, there were these opportunities to take on these short-term contracts, 3-month, 6-month, 9-month projects, basically project-based contracts with different industry associations headquartered in Ottawa. Some were to help them with public opinion research, which I was exposed to from my time in politics. Some were very government relations, GR centric, help us understand who's who in the zoo on Parliament Hill and how they're going to vote and what's happening in committee and follow this legislation. Some of the projects were very comms, oriented. We've got an initiative that we want to roll out, help us build a communications plan for it. And so I was dabbling with a whole bunch of different things. I was really enjoying it. I liked the diversity of the issue sets I was dealing with and the organization types and the sectors. And then sometime in late 2011, my, at the time, girlfriend's father, a person who would go on to become my father-in-law and an incredible mentor and friend, and today a business partner of mine, Bruce Anderson, approached me and said, you seem like you really like this contract-based consulting. Have you ever, thought of making a go of it? And instead of sort of thinking about what your next thing would be, your next single thing, maybe you do a whole bunch of things. And I thought, no, that has never occurred to me. I didn't realize that was an option. Is that an option? So I would go on to incorporate a one-man show, small business, called it Polycoms. And I started, sending invoices on letterhead on this logo I designed. And I was really enjoying that. And a couple more months went by, and I had another conversation with Bruce, and he said, I've been thinking of starting a business, and it could be one of the things that you get to work on. And I said, oh, interesting. What's the business? Tell me more. And he said, I'm thinking of starting an ad agency that would exclusively focus on public affairs, advocacy. That's it. That's the only kind of assignment it would work on. It would never try to sell shoes, or would never try to persuade people to eat at a particular restaurant. It would only build campaigns advertisements, creative collateral, and think through media relations and media buys as it relates to that, advocacy, legislation, causes, issues. That was super intriguing to me because that sounded kind of like what I was doing for politicians and a political party, but as a hired gun basically. And so my second question was, well, who's doing that? Who would we be competing with if we start this thing? And his answer was nobody. And I really liked that answer because I thought, really, nobody is doing this. And he said, not exclusively. There was nobody who had really set up a shop to be disciplined and discriminatory to say this is the only kind of work we're going to take on. We're not going to take on B2C and B2B type marketing and advertising assignments. And that's how my journey into what I do now, basically starting a company and managing a company. That's how it evolved. We started this boutique ad agency called Ideas and Issues Advertising, I2 for short, and that was the start of something wild and crazy.
Yeah, very interesting. I know when maybe the first time we met, you kind of touched on how that whole route came about, let's say, but I never kind of tied it all together that, at least for what I'm starting to gather, kind of putting, let's say, some of the puzzle pieces together. I'm assuming that then led into rebranding and creating Spark Advocacy, maybe combining those two businesses you're referring to, right? Is that what ended up happening?
Well, so the way the story goes, just to do a more compressed version of it,
Yeah.
is I2 was purely virtual
Okay.
in a pre-COVID era.
Yeah.
Before Zoom, we were running the business off the 1-800 conference calls, where no one had to look at anyone else's face. You didn't have to worry about your what you were wearing or your background, and that's how we ran that business. And most of the clients were actually headquartered outside of Ottawa, even though the principals in that business were largely based in Ottawa, headquartered in Toronto, Calgary, Vancouver, a few in Montreal. We never grew beyond, I want to say 6 or 7 bodies. I think maybe would have been the max. And the clientele was very natural resources, extractive sector, financial services heavy. And fast forward to 2016, and I was feeling, similar to how I felt in 2011 on Parliament Hill as a political staffer, that I needed to switch it up, that we had to shake things up, that we had to evolve, that we were leaving opportunity on the table. And so what we did was a number of the principals in that business of I2 basically blew it up, walked away, and started our own thing. And so Bruce and my other business partner, Adrian Jean, AJ, he's the creative Yoda behind our operation today. We basically took the idea of I2. We sort of characterize it as taking the hot engine out of the car, out of the chassis, and we think we put it into something that was more aerodynamic, lighter, faster, more tech. And that's how Spark got started at the end of 2016. And we wanted to diversify the client portfolio. We wanted to bring in a more diverse workforce. We wanted to work for different org types. We wanted to play in sectors we weren't in, and we wanted to diversify the service offering. I2 was very much an ad agency. Spark is a fully integrated marketing communications firm that has a lot of different tools in the Swiss Army knife that we can pull out and deploy on a as needed basis when the folks we work with actually need those things, and we keep it in the toolbox when they don't, and we run pretty lean.
And before we get into the Spark a bit further, going back to that moment, I guess you're saying like in 2016 where you kind of came to, let's say, the crossroads where like, hey, like something needs to change. Was it just in regards to you seeing the potential of like the type of projects you could be working on, the way you could kind of be, let's say, flexing that creative muscle or that business muscle that maybe you have in the back of your mind, or like, hey, like I can't just stay in this little corner. Like I have the whole room to dance within, let's say, if that makes
That's a
sense. Is
great
that
way
what
to
kind
put
of
it.
happened? Yeah, I don't know where that
Yeah.
came up. That just came right now.
Hey man, maybe you got a career in public affairs, impact marketing, and communications. I like that.
Yeah.
That's a great way to describe it. So I think it was sort of a two-parter. I think one was what you just said. It was this strong belief. I think we've proven that there was demand, that there was opportunity, and we wanted to step into it. We wanted to wrap our hands around it. And I think the second thing harken back to the family restaurant, and I wanted something that I had skin in the game on. I wanted something that I could nurture and build and grow because I had a piece of it because I was an actual owner in it. I don't know that was something that was obvious to me when I was earlier in my career, um, but it occurred to me sort of through those years of consulting and helping to run as the general manager and vice president at I2. I really enjoyed that, but it wasn't mine. It was a thing that I was inside of, and I was instrumental in running day to day and managing and shaping it, but it was still missing that element of pride of ownership. And so that was the second piece. The first was, hey, there's a lot of opportunity here. But we need to do a few things differently. We need to innovate, and we can't just be status quo. And then the second piece was that wanting that pride of ownership, wanting to feel truly invested in something because I had skin in the game, and yeah, that's high risk, but also high reward, and that was appealing to me. I really liked that.
Yeah, I can definitely kind of see where you're coming from that standpoint, and I guess then kind of building into it further, um, in regards to Spark itself. Do you mind maybe diving into that a bit further? I know you were maybe briefly touching on what it is, but do you mind maybe kind of going on it a bit further, and then maybe talking about how it came about, what it was like when you first started it, and then what you've been able to do since?
Yeah. So we wanted to take a more expansive view of the work. We still wanted to be in a niche that focused on issues based assignments, but we didn't want it to be so focused on only advocacy, on only what happens on Parliament Hill. It's a big country, and so we wanted to go after assignments, and we thought we had the right know-how, experience, skills, capabilities, service offering to also work on assignments that had something to do with awareness and education, PSA type of campaigns, on reputation management for people who had a problem or for people who were looking to expand, in their offering or their footprint in a particular region. We wanted to help charities raise money. We wanted to, work with folks to change perceptions about a particular industry, and maybe think about, a career in that industry. So we wanted to take a more expansive view than only working on advocacy, advertising assignments. And we wanted to take a more expansive view of the service offering. We didn't just want to come with one tool in the toolbox and say, yeah, well, that's a really interesting problem or a really interesting opportunity. You're going to need an ad campaign. We wanted to be able to bring other tools to that fight, right? Other tools to solve that problem or take advantage of that opportunity. So web development, public relations, earned media support, public opinion research, polling, focus groups, qual-quant, insights, government relations. What we wanted to be able to do is basically have a full, garage filled with tools to be able to say, okay, this is a reputation campaign, and you need to improve the reputation of your organization in the Lower Mainland. So these are the tools we're going to bring to bear on that, on that assignment. instead of only saying, yeah, the one tool we have is ads and an ad campaign, and that's it. And so that was the idea behind what we set out to scale in late 2016 when we started Spark. The early years were like a lot of startups. It was a lean team. I think in our first year we were something like 5-6 people, and we were running wild. Everyone was doing a bit of everything, right? As you do in early days startup mode. But where things would grow to is a team of 36, 37, I think. I should know the answer to that. Working for, at any given time, 65, 70 clients across Canada, every org type, you name it, we touch it. Union work, nonprofit charities, NGOs, corporations, publicly traded, startups, privately held, lots of trade associations, lots of member-based associations, and every sector. We're in it. Health, tech, transportation, financial services, international development, uh, extractive sector. We touch it all, and I get bored very easily, and I love that diversity. That on any given day when I wake up, and any given week when I look at my calendar, I get to play, in a sandbox that is completely different, day to day, hour to hour, in terms of the issues, the causes, and the organization types. I love it. Like I
Yeah,
genuinely love my job.
I can definitely see that. And to be honest, as you're saying it there, just in regards to the toolbox, something that kind of came to mind was just in regards to, as you're saying it, I was having a conversation with someone about this last night because I have an idea that I'd love to kind of just try on the weekends now to start. And the biggest thing is obviously I did the sports marketing agency, and I was like, hey, I think I can apply to those skills to something else. And the
Yeah,
thing I kept referring back to was, and I think this is maybe where you're coming from, you correct me if I'm wrong, it's almost owning the full value chain of that opportunity, if that makes sense. Like if you're already going to company X, right? And you're providing them, let's say social media services, something for that. But then you see, hey, they also need help in, web development, media, all those different things. It sounds like, what if we're here, we might as well just fix everything, right? With that toolbox. And I think that was something pretty cool where even recently, that's something that's been coming to mind a lot where, let's say if there's future businesses that I'd like to start or get involved in, I'd like to be able to then, own that full value chain where, hey, if we're already having access to that audience, why not, give them this, give them that, and making sure we can kind of maximize everything we can out of them.
yeah, precisely.
Yeah.
You nailed it, right? The upside is exactly what you described. Why would you leave uh, opportunity on the table when those other capabilities, those other services, those other products are germane to what you're already doing, right? The upside is, of course, the financial upside if you're able to successfully sell those things, but it's also the quality assurance of knowing you're controlling that value chain across the entire portfolio. There is a downside, right? There is a dark side to it that I think any entrepreneur should be clear-eyed about, which is not to get into a new service offering or a new vertical if you cannot actually deliver on it. Because if if you're achieving success in whatever your core or initial offering is, whether it's service based or product based, then presumably you've got some level of trust from your clients and from your customers, and that's amazing. I mean, that is the best resource of all for any business. That's wind in your sails. So the worst thing you could do, then the biggest mistake you could make, in my opinion, is to get into a new area where you're not set up to deliver and demonstrate the same quality or the same impact, the same outcomes that they're used to with your core offering, that they're with you, that client, that customer is with you already for. So the owning of the value chain is seductive. I think it's a really smart, goal on the horizon to think about and to pursue, the note of caution, the bucket of cold water I would put on that is to think through what you need to do to resource it properly, and how you want to differentiate yourself from your competitors in the market, so that you could make the case to existing clients that they should have you do those things too, or how do you go out and you find new business customers and clients who don't already know you, and persuade them that you've got some amount of expertise and abilities in that new offering that they should consider you for.
Yeah, no, that absolutely makes sense, and something that I should definitely keep in mind going forward. And I guess with that too, before we get into these final questions, I'd like to ask every guest at the end. Do you mind maybe just touching on what your day to day looks like, right? So let's say someone's tuning in, they're just dropping in now, or they want to know a bit more about Perry. What does your day to day look like? Because I know for one how busy you are just in regards when we try to catch up. But what does that look like for you?
Yeah, it's very different from day to day and hour to hour, to be totally honest with you. There's a good amount of my day and week that is client facing. So sitting in discovery meetings, kickoff meetings, brainstorming meetings, meetings where we might be unveiling and rolling out comprehensive campaign communication strategy, or just showcasing creative, or just showcasing a targeting strategy, a targeting plan. There's other moments where I've got to scramble and I've got to drop what I'm doing because there's a client with a crisis situation. Something happened in a provincial legislature, some bylaw at Toronto City Council, or Donald Trump said something, and it requires me, and what the reason they're with us is, requires our team to sort of pivot, stop what we were doing, and jump in and roll up our sleeves. So there's that aspect of my day to day. Another big piece of my week is business development. So there's a lot of consults, a lot of intros, way too much coffee, which causes me to probably be a little bit more caffeinated than I need to be in my afternoons and evenings, that I build into my day and my week, because for most new clients, the number one question folks have in professional service industry is who's trusted you, who's already put their trust in you, and who are the people behind this thing that I would be putting my trust in. So they want to know the logos, the brands, the organizations that are you're already working with, or that you have worked with them, and then so who are these people that are going to lead this, and so I end up being not always, but often the ambassador for answering those two questions. Then there's what I would characterize as the business, the administration, operational side of what I have to do day to day and week to week. It's the financial side of any business operation, and working with my finance folks on that. It's the human resources side, making sure our talent is happy, is being stimulated and challenged with professional development that's raising their game, especially in our line of work. These communications channels, social media platforms, the AI tools that are now at our disposal, and what we can do with them on video creation, on web development, on copywriting, on graphic design and illustration and animation. It's incredible. And so the need to make sure that we have mechanisms to expose our team to those tools and train them on those tools and trial and experiment with those tools is really important. So any given day, any given week, like a lot of founders and like a lot of president, CEO, executive director type folks, it's very diverse. Which again, if you can't already tell, I really like that.
Yeah, no, that's good stuff, and I can absolutely tell. And I guess then, before we wrap it all up, then I have two questions I like to ask every guest. Episode 161, I've said it probably 161 times. I'm gonna live until I'm 103. I'm gonna be in a rocking chair thinking about all the, unique things hopefully I've been able to do in my career. and hopefully moments are going to stand out to me. So let's say I put Perry in the same situation. 100, no, not 160, 103 years old on a rocking chair, thinking about all the things you've done in your career so far. What's maybe one story that you're certain will stand out to you at that age on that rocking chair regarding your career?
Oh, that's a tough question.
That's why I
You
ask
know,
it.
I know. Yeah, I love it. The short answer is I don't know, because I got a lot of gas in the tank, right? So if you force me to say uh, my life is flashing before my eyes tomorrow, what would that answer be? It's that I think I've played a role in building something that outlasts me. That's enduring, and that's been incredibly rewarding. The people here are, as I look out of the glass of the pod I'm in recording this with you, are incredible. So lucky to get to work with these folks. And if I, you know, took a walk in the snow tomorrow and didn't come back, they would continue to be wildly successful. And I know that might sound like a cheesy answer, but that's the truthful, authentic answer. Is I think the thing that I found most rewarding is not one particular client campaign or outcome that I've, and I got lots of war stories, and your pods really should be done over a beer or a cocktail or a glass of wine or something, because they're, some great, funny, awesome, intense war stories related to some of the projects we've got to work on. But if I had to really zoom out and challenge myself to say, but what's the thing that really stands out so far? It's building something that I feel is really strong and sustaining and enduring, whether or not I'm here doing what I do or not. That's the truthful answer. I hope that ends up being the answer too when I'm 103.
Yeah.
And
No,
we're just getting started. There's a lot of growth and a lot of scaling that I'm still hungry and interested to do.
for sure. No, I think it's a great answer. To be honest, as you were saying it, I was like, that's something I would love to be on a rocking chair. Also thinking of where you're building something that doesn't need you to be successful, right? Not saying that it doesn't, but in regards to like it can function and people will have success where you build something that can, that's self sufficient to an extent. And you're absolutely right about the beer aspect. That's definitely something when I took a pause for the podcast and wanted to rebrand it. My number one goal now is to get a beer sponsor again. That's kind of when we get going. So that's going to be something that I'm going to be focusing on the next little
I
bit.
like it. I
But
like that.
yeah, the last question I now have for you. We went to the future, 103. We're in our time machine. We're going to take that time machine, crank it back a bit, and we're going to go to back in time, right? Let's say it's you walking on campus for the first time,
Mm.
moving to Ottawa, or let's say it's when you realized you bit off more than you could chew when you're in second year regarding that, full-time job and part-time student life. If you go chat with that younger Perry, what's one thing that you've learned since then that you're like, hey, little Perry, this is something you should know because I wish I knew, and it's been a major impact ever since I've learned it.
Yeah, I love that question. It's a hard answer to give because I know when people, younger people earlier in their careers hear it, it's probably one of those things that you hear and you shake your head and you're like, that's easy for you to say. But the truthful, genuine answer to that question I'd give you, Chris, is don't sweat the small things. Don't overestimate how big that challenge is that you're facing. That if it's sort of folks going through post-secondary, that assignment, that essay that you're working on, if it's that report that you got to do, in year 1 or 2 of your job, or that biz dev opportunity you're chasing that doesn't come through, that's not the stuff you're going to remember. I can remember that stuff earlier in my career. Uh, being really seized with those challenges, with those low moments, and you can let it kind of consume you and really stress you out, and it's unproductive. What I would say is, take those stresses, take those anxieties, and channel them, and crush whatever that thing is in front of you, and if it's a fail, if it's a fumble, if you trip and fall, who cares? On to the next hill is what I would say. So I know that's maybe advice that a person earlier in their career might hear and go, yeah, that's nice for you to say, but it is the truth. If I could go back and talk to 20 something Perry, that's the advice I would give is you're in a marathon, not a sprint. So don't sweat the small things. Recognize that the things that you think are big things, when you zoom out in the 103-year-old rocking chair with the VR headset on, you're not really going to be sweating those things or thinking about those things is the truth. You'll be zooming out, in the warm glow of the bigger picture.
For sure. No, I think that's a great answer. And to be honest, I find a lot of times the best advice that people give to the audience, their younger self, etc., it often is, let's say, the smaller elements, or let's say the cliche answers that people, when you're younger, you don't necessarily want to hear, but it is what it is, right? Like that's why it's said so often. So
Yeah.
I think it's a perfect way to end the podcast, unless there's anything else to share, Perry. Really appreciate you coming on and sharing your route.
Well, thanks for having me. It's fun to get to talk with you about it, and I love that you do this. I think it's
Yeah.
great because if I had a bonus piece of advice, it's for young me, for young anyone. It's listen to people who have been there and done it before, so that you don't have to make their mistakes, and
Yeah.
and and you can figure out what works for you. So I think I think your pod is a great resource for people. So keep up the good
Yeah.
work.
No, absolutely appreciate it. It's a great resource for myself as well. But yeah, with that said, that's it for episode 161, and stay tuned for next week's episode. Thank you.